Hey, Yobo here. So a lot of people have been requesting for me to make a furring tutorial. This is going to be a simple furring tutorial for masks with mainly one or two colors. Works with canines and felines. It works the same with both. You shouldn't really have any difficulties. You can do this after you've painted your mask or before. I use an airbrush, so that's why I fur before I make my mask. So this is the mask that I used for today. As you can see, it's mainly one pure color. And if you're looking for more of a complex furring tutorial for masks like these with more complex parts, I will be making a tutorial for that very soon. But if you're a beginner and you're just looking for something simple to make or just to try it out, this tutorial is definitely for you. So the things you are going to need to be able to fur your mask is some sort of marker, a hot glue gun with hot glue sticks. A sewing needle and thread will be optional, it is not a must, and a handy dandy pair of scissors.
So once you have your mask, we are going to start by furring the sides of the mask. Make sure your fur is pointing the right way. I make sure my fur is pointing upwards. So as you can see, you can also draw an arrow onto the fur if you need to. So you're going to put your mask onto the fur so you can measure the length and width of how long you want it. I make rectangles, as you can see. I kind of mark where the top of where I'm furring and the bottom of where I'm furring is. I make sure it's about 3 fingers long. I mean, that's just what works best with me since I usually don't have a tape measure handy or anything. But you don't really need to stress about this part because you can always cut down the fur, but you can't, regrow the fur. So it's okay to have a long piece. And I make sure they are about the exact same length. Once again, it does not need to be perfect as you can always trim it down. I make sure to do tiny cuts so you can see it's still very long so I don't accidentally cut the fur. You're now going to get your hot glue gun out and turn it on. And now that we have our 2 pieces, I am now going to put it on the sides of the mask. I put it about halfway-ish. You kind of want to see where you want to put it first. It might be different for every mask, but at least make sure 30 to 40% of it is glued down, or else it might be way too floppy. But yet again, it might just be to your liking. I glue the sides of the mask, as you can see here. Sometimes I have to double glue it even after furring it, just to make sure everything's put down. I then try and put it down, where I want it, and I kind of move it back and forth to make sure all of it's on, just to make sure it's stable. I usually have to hold it for about 2 minutes. It depends on how fast your glue sets. So now that you have one side, you can do the exact same thing to the second. It's the exact same process. So this part's more optional, but you see how there's kind of a huge cut right there and it doesn't really fade in smoothly. I cut out some tiny little rectangles and put it right there so it has more of a smooth ending. I hot glue it on. You can see it's a little floppy, so you can sew it if you want, but I'm only sewing it because it's a commission and I want to make sure it's in place and everything. You can always just hot glue it. You don't have to do anything special if it's just like a personal mask. So then I put some felt in the ear since, as you can see, I don't usually felt the whole mask. You can see here we are now going to fur the ear. I trace the shape of the ear sort of, or how long it is, and then once again it's a little bit longer, but once again you can always trim it down if it's too long and it doesn't need to be perfect. I then trace the exact same thing on the other side. Make sure they are facing the opposite way or else you have 2 of the exact same one. Once again, do tiny little cuts at a time, and now you'll have your 2 pieces which you'll just hot glue onto the sides of the mask. You can kind of place them down so you can kind of get a representation of where you want, and then you are going to glue them down. If you're having issues where you can see the little white part showing, I will show how you can get rid of that. Basically, as you can see, I'm going to hot glue it down, like right where the edge is, and you're going to kind of push the fur over it. Just make sure you don't over hot glue it, but as you can see, you can just kind of push it over so it hides those little white seams. You might have to do this a couple times or just do tiny little pushes of hot glue at the time, but it definitely gives it a much smoother look. Now we're going to do the exact same process, but to the inside of the ear. You're just going to trace it out pretty much the exact same way, except you're going to make more of like a banana shape for these ones, as you can see, because they're a lot more curved. Or you could call them moon crescents, whatever you want really. But as you can see, it shapes the ear definitely a lot more. You're then going to glue this down, and you're going to do the exact same steps as you did for the first ones. And now you can see there's kind of that weird open gap. This part's optional. I just kind of make rectangles. That was a very messy rectangle, but I also kind of make it a little curved, so it's not just like a straight rectangle, so it kind of shapes the mask a bit more. And for example, you do not need to do this. Like, here's an example of my other masks. Like, this is just kind of an optional if you're kind of trying to have a more fluffy look. Now for the back, I specifically do this because these have floppy ears, but you just kind of trace it out. Mainly, this is just a lot of tracing out. You can always use a piece of paper, trace it out, cut it out, and then put it on. But I've done this enough times, I kind of just have the gist of it. And then you're going to push the hot glue together, like right in between the sides, so it gives it more of a cleaner look, because you don't want a bunch of open seams. But as you can see, the fur hides it as you push it together. And now you're already done with the ears. There's only 2 more little steps. You see that little bald part in the middle? You just got to cut out a tiny little rectangle, and you fur it in basically the same way you did the sides. You can always trim it down if you want. And I do the insides of the ears. This part's also kind of optional. I just think it gives it more of a realistic look. I have my black and my beige. You can also do beige and white, whatever you want. So I first glue down the black in the inside, and then I do the beige on top. And then with everything brushed out, you have finished furring your mask. This might take a few attempts. I've been doing this for so long. It just kind of comes to you. But don't stress about it if it doesn't come out perfect. You can always keep trying. The more you do it, the better it comes out. But that is the finished tutorial. I will be making more tutorials very shortly, as I have a lot of commissions to work on. And thank you so much for watching. Leave any questions below.